All right, good evening. It is 5 p.m. and I call to order the March 10th, 2026 Board of Trustees Facilities Study and Budget Workshop. The district is in compliance with South Carolina Freedom of Information Act by notifying the media of the date, time, and place of the meeting. The district tapes the meeting for accuracy in preparing the minutes. Will you please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for a moment of silence? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated. Do I hear a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
Madam Chair, I move we approve the agenda as presented.
Thanks, Ms. Shealy. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the motion carries. All right, we welcome back McMillan, Passon, and Smith for our second facility study workshop. Mr. Cooper, would you like to introduce our guests?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chair. Tonight we do have Michelle Smith and her team from MPS Architecture to do round 2 of the board workshops regarding the ongoing facility study. Last time, you'll remember, we talked about focus was kind of on growth and potential new construction, potential additions that could be needed in the coming years. Today, the discussion will center more along the lines of capital projects that are needed and maintenance projects to ensure our district facilities are continue to be maintained as high functioning district assets. We'll wrap the presentation up with really kind of what a proposed timeline for construction could look like, looking at some of the projects we talked with y'all about last time. So we'll run through capital and maintenance projects, and then we'll wrap it back up, circling back around to some of the additions and new construction that we talked about last time. And so with no further ado, I'll turn it over to Ms. Smith.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Thank you. That's better. We talked a little bit about this the last time. We were focusing on our growth and capacity projects. Tonight, we're really going to be talking about the maintenance projects at every single facility to ensure that these are all captured as part of the district's long-range facilities maintenance plan. And like Mr. Clark mentioned, toward the end of the meeting, we're going to touch on the funding and the scheduling of those projects. So just to remind you a little bit about the process that we have embarked on, we're really now in step 2, moving to step 3. We've spent, like I mentioned the last time, we spent a significant amount of time last year walking the facilities led by Sarah and her team. We walked nearly 4 million square feet of district property. Through that, and after getting specific inputs from the maintenance department in regards to other building components, I'll touch on that in just a moment. We've all input these into the plan, and now we're at the time where now we're synthesizing everything. We have all of the data and information collected. We're working with our partner, Thompson Turner, on cost and prioritizing the projects for the next 5 to 10 years. So just to remind you a little bit about what went into the maintenance, capturing the maintenance projects for across the district. Again, like I said, Sarah and her team physically walked every single building. We had a roofing designer who would also walk on the roof for the facility, and we got input from engineers throughout the process as needed. Like I mentioned the last time, our physical review was top from ceiling to floor. We marked every deficiency on a floor plan, which was geolocated to identify the location of that deficiency. And why that is important is because we knew that all of these deficiencies would be rolled up into a maintenance plan, and we knew it was important for the maintenance personnel and folks to be able to understand where those deficiencies are so that we could make the most of the data and information we're gathering. Just to review the scoring that our team used for the deficiencies. We saw this the last time. A score of 5 is like new or nearly new. A score of 1 is extremely worn. Life safety may be compromised. It's a deficiency that wants to be addressed sooner than later. A score of 3 is like right in the middle. There's obviously signs of wear and tear, but the component still functions properly and has some lifetime remaining in its usefulness. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sarah. Sorry, Maggie, you're going to say a little preview, and then Sarah will take us through all of the projects.
Thanks, Michelle. Hey, good evening, everybody. Just before we get into kind of the individual scopes of each school, I just wanted to let everyone know there is cost shown on each slide. I would want to caution everyone to just go in and start adding all these numbers up. Just like kind of what we talked about last time, we have spent more time honing in the growth and capacity over the last couple of weeks, which is going to come later in the presentation. We've started the process of the cost for all these individual maintenance and capital improvement projects within these individual schools. So I just want to be clear that those are still ongoing, changing, and then also they have not been placed within a timeline, so we have not applied escalation. So we kind of talked about this last time, but I just want to be clear. We're trying to give you an idea of what that cost could look like, but it's still being refined as we move forward. And then also just wanted to let you guys know a little bit about putting together costs for these projects. We've been tasked with not just providing you a cost of what a construction company, if you went out and hard bid this project, like what that would cost. A lot of times, many of these projects are going to get packaged together and put out for a CM, or potentially your maintenance guys could do some of them. So with the way that we've priced it is more in line with what a construction manager would price. So we've included things like contingency, licenses, bonds, insurance, and even sometimes soft costs. So soft costs could be things like what your district would have to incur, like furniture costs. They would go out and procure, but it's still associated with the project, technology costs, and even an owner contingency. So all of that stuff is in this number. So it's not like you could just go out, bid it, and get a number and it match up, if that makes sense. And I'm happy to answer any questions about that, but just wanted to caution everyone before you start seeing numbers, kind of how those numbers are prepared.
All right, so we're going to run through these the same way that we did last time in the same cluster orders. So we're going to start out with the Gilbert cluster. And so the 4s and the 5s, by the way, like Michelle mentioned with the scoring, most of these charts aren't going to have those on there because when we're walking through, we don't flag all of the great things at the beginning. We go back and do that secondarily. So the instances are primarily going to be the things that we see as a maintenance issue that needs to be picked up. So we've got your instances by rating again and by category per school. We've also in the top by the school name have the school score, which that does count in your 4s and your 5s, your goods and your perfects. I want to give you a screenshot of each school's floor plan based on how we've calculated the utilization. So whether it's a classroom, itinerant, a design elective, or a special education component, so you can see how we're looking at how the school is used. Every slide is going to have on the right there the main maintenance items, and for us, those are really the biggest ticket items. There's going to be aesthetic things. There's going to be smaller issues that need to be handled as well that will be roped into that cost, but for example, Centerville Elementary, the biggest things we're looking at are the academic capacity, which is why we discussed a potential addition last time, and then an increase to these car stacking line. So everything else at this school is really just going to be general maintenance needs associated with it. Gilbert Elementary also academic capacity issues, and we talked about the sewer and plumbing capacity here. So that's kind of a big one for the entire Gilbert cluster, all 3 of the Gilbert schools that are down there. So we have a recommendation here again, which was repurposing this into a primary elementary school, the pre-K through 2. to relieve some capacity needs in the Gilbert area, and then again, more general maintenance and renovation projects. So this one again came in at a 2.8 on the school score. Gilbert Middle School also has that academic capacity issue along with the sewer and plumbing capacity. This one also needs some roof repairs and some rooftop unit replacements. So those are some of the big ticket items there, coming in at a 2.8 again for this school, with our recommendation being to repurpose to the upper elementary, and then maintenance and renovation projects. So we'll round out Gilbert with the high school. This one's got quite a longer list over there on the maintenance. They've got academic and sewer issues, additional parking needed, some pretty hefty athletics upgrades, the water pressure boosters, and roof replacement. And again, if we were to do those additions there, a lot of the big ticket items like the roof replacement would come along at the same time so that we're doing all the work at the campus in one go. Any questions on the Gilbert cluster? No? All right.
I just have one question.
Yep.
Back on Gilbert Middle,
Mm-hmm.
there was one abbreviation you had. I think I missed RTU,
Yes, sorry,
Replacements, what's
rooftop
that?
units.
rooftop units.
Yeah,
Okay,
so that's the
thanks.
mechanical up on the roof. Okay, so then we go to the Pelion cluster, starting out with Forts Pond Elementary. This one was when we talked about last time that we weren't sure if an addition would potentially go there or if it would really swing to Pelion Elementary. So that one is still up in the air, but either way, there will likely need to be one wing of academic addition going on there. This school came in at a 2.9, and it also needs roof replacement, some site regrading, and an HVAC replacement in 5 to 7 years. And then Pelion Elementary here, again, we could potentially do the academic addition there if that's the direction that the group wanted to go. This one really mostly just needs some safety upgrades, so that's going to be your door hardware, your cameras, your fencing around the campus, and gates that go into it as well. So this one is predominantly safety upgrades. Coming in at a 2.8. We got Pelion Middle School next. This one's going to have some pretty big athletic upgrades needed, as well as an energy management system update. No additions or anything needed here, so this one's just going to be general maintenance and renovation projects. Rounding it at 2.8 again. Old Pelion Middle, the maintenance that needs to happen here is a roof replacement, although part of the recommendation is to potentially demolish portions of the campus and save the items that are newer and more usable for current functions. So this one is in a bit of flux. Pelion High School also has a handful of issues that needs addressed. They don't need to have any academic additions that we're doing here, but we are looking at a roof replacement, an HVAC replacement, lighting upgrades, energy management, and athletic upgrades. So this one needs quite a bit from an infrastructure standpoint to keep this school in a good place. So this one got a 2.7. Any questions on the Pelion cluster?
Just a quick question about
Yes.
the old middle school.
Yes,
What's the
ma'am.
thought process behind the demo? Why the recommendation for that?
So a lot of the portions of this campus are, because it's not currently being used right now, it's not being kept up to the same maintenance standards that all the rest of your schools presently are. A lot of the spaces aren't really going to be functional for classrooms if they were taken back over, given the size or the nature that they are. However, the two chunks on the left, which is the two-story building, is in pretty good condition and could absolutely still be used for classrooms if a different program wanted to go there. Same for the gym. That is still an area that could absolutely be saved, but we wouldn't want to put so much money into saving something, if that makes sense, that isn't worth keeping some of those portions. The demolition is, like I said, still in flux. That's discussion with the district team and what they think is worth keeping for the campus. Does that answer that?
I have one question.
Yes.
I see a theme of roof replacements. What is the, and y'all maybe answer, the average age of the roofs in the district?
Try to keep them 20, 25 years, depending on the type, unless Jim's got any. Yeah, so we have a spreadsheet from them that talks about every school, which roofs have been replaced in what portions and what type they are when the warranty goes up, and we're trying to price them in that line. right, so White Knoll Cluster. Start this one with Carolina Springs Elementary. This one's going to be a car loop expansion as well, roof replacement project. And when I say roof replacement, it doesn't necessarily mean the entire, it could just be a portion of the campus. This one also needs some rooftop unit and through wall heat pump upgrades, so some HVAC work that needs to happen there. Comes in at 2.7, but no additions here, just maintenance and renovation projects that we're looking at. Carolina Springs Middle School would need the academic addition to alleviate some of that capacity issue. Their maintenance and renovation that we're looking at is car and bus loop modifications, and then again security, so all of your door hardware, your fencing, your cameras, bringing that up to a current standard. Deerfield Elementary, we also previously talked about a potential academic addition here to alleviate some of that growth and capacity. Their maintenance and renovation projects are really the same thing, car and bus loop and safety upgrades needed for this campus. Red Bank Elementary, we are not thinking that there needs to be any academic additions here, but there needs to be some work outside on the asphalt, the car stacking, and then also the HVAC and electrical upgrades throughout the campus. It's a 2.8. Saxagatha really doesn't have a whole lot that it needs there. There's some playground maintenance issues that are happening, just really maintenance and renovation projects and bringing that one back up to current standard as well.
Can you back up to Red Bank for just a second?
Absolutely.
You mentioned electrical upgrades. Can you unpack that a little bit? What would electrical upgrades be? Is that just code or is that other things?
Yeah, it's different for every school. For some of them, they need to be brought up to LED lighting fixtures throughout. Some of them, it needs to be their management system and their controls for it. So for the campus to be able to bring everything online at the same time. Does that make sense? Yeah. Unless Jim has anything to add to that one. All right, South Lake Elementary obviously came in at 3.9 because this one is pretty new. This is where I'm saying there's a lot of 4s and 5s at this school that you're not seeing in this donut because we're not concerned about that work needing to be done because it's pretty brand new. It's in great condition. So we're listing no major needs here. It's pretty much going to just be aesthetic things, just general maintenance, keeping it going. White Knoll Elementary, we're also not too concerned with this one. We're not really needing any academic additions. It's just going to be some asphalt work and safety upgrades for the entire campus. So those, again, will be your hardware, cameras, fencing, anything else mentioned by, because we did talk to the SRO at every school and got their feedback, you know. Then we go into White Knoll Middle School. Again, this one has no major needs to it. It's just going to be the general maintenance, aesthetic things, keeping it up to snuff with the rest of your campuses. So this one comes in higher on the scale at a 3 as well. And then White Knoll High School, also not looking at any academic additions here. The maintenance and renovations they're going to need are some emergency road access. They've got a lot of areas near the athletics where if they needed to get an ambulance or something down there, it'd be difficult. So that's what we're talking about there with the emergency roads. Athletic upgrades, which I think you'll see pretty much at every high school, probably with the exception of River Bluff. Camera upgrades and hardware upgrades as well here for safety. Right. Anything on the White Knoll before we move on?
I know we already passed the Gilbert one, but it just popped in my head. I noticed for some of the schools you're talking about parking, you're talking about asphalt stuff. There was no need you saw at Gilbert Elementary for parking or anything like that. I just spent some time at that school recently, and not my area of expertise, but it was kind of crazy.
Yeah, so some of them, if it's going to be that they need a minimal amount of parking, it might not necessarily hit the list of the super expensive items there.
But it could be on a short list that y'all have.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, the list that you're, like these lists you're seeing here, it's actually a very extensive list, all the way down to your ceiling tiles, your floor tiles, cracks in the wall, repaint the school.
Okay.
Everything in between, these are just going to be the ones that are really driving up the cost the most.
Got it.
And likely things that the district maintenance staff can't do in-house.
Okay.
If I could add just one thing, just totally different subject, but you do see at many of these elementary schools camera upgrades.
Uh-huh.
We are in the process of doing those. Those are a lot of those 24B and 25B projects focused on elementary camera upgrades. So when we talked last time about this is a working document, we're still cleaning things up. That's just one good example of it.
Okay. Well, that makes me feel better because
Yep.
that was a lot.
Yeah, and then the same thing with the cameras, the IT, the security. That's going to be like badge access on doors. That's going to be getting all the classroom keys all done the same so the teachers have the same access. It breaks down to a ton of things. So when I say like safety and security, it's a long list of things in there. All right, so on to the River Bluff cluster. Lakeside Middle School, we're not looking at any academic addition needs here. It's in pretty good condition at a 3.4. The main thing here is going to be some asphalt repairs. But all in all, great condition for the school. Meadow Glen Elementary, we are potentially looking at those academic additions here because this is kind of in that area where everything in that heat map was pretty red. Then on top of that, for security, camera, hardware, cell reception, all of those upgrades to bring it up to a safe standard. Meadow Glen Middle School, also in very good condition, came in at a 3.3 for this one. It's really just going to be maintenance and renovation as well. No academic additions needed at this time. There's going to be a lot of retention pond upgrades here, which is a pretty big one. Car and bus loop modifications, and then fencing and gate upgrades for that safety component as well.
Can you back up?
Absolutely.
Just Meadow Glen Elementary School cell reception upgrades. Is
Mhm.
that adding repeaters throughout the building, or is that something else we're talking about?
It's typically repeaters. So as part of the conversation with the SRO is, are you able to call out for help with your walkie or with your cell phone or any other way at any area in the building? Can you call out? So typically repeaters. Midway Elementary School. This one we were looking at the potential academic addition to alleviate that capacity need. We also need those security pieces. 2.7 though, pretty good. New Providence Elementary, this is another one in that same area in question that we're not really sure if we can add on to that or if the additions need to happen elsewhere, but there is the academic capacity issue here. Big things would be the roof replacement, the rooftop units again, which is the HVAC, the plumbing capacity upgrades, and security upgrades. Oak Grove Elementary, this is where we talked about doing a small academic addition to alleviate some of that capacity. They do need some roof repairs and some HVAC repairs just because of the age of the school, but a 2.6 is where they landed for Oak Grove. And then River Bluff High School also came in at a pretty good score, 3.2. It's obviously one of the newer campuses, so we're less concerned there. We did talk through a little bit of academic capacity issues last time and potentially adding a wing on to the end of the academic bar up there. But for the most part, the rest of the school is in very good condition. So 3.2. Any thoughts on River Bluff before we move on? All right. And the Lexington cluster. So we'll start with Beechwood Middle School. Again, very good condition, one of your newer campuses. So this will be a 3.2. We do have a little bit of that academic capacity issue where we discussed last time doing a small addition on the end of each wing so it keeps them in their grade level components. But other than that, this one's just going to be general maintenance for this school. Lake Murray Elementary School, another good score coming out of 3. The biggest thing we saw here was car stacking issues, so there would need to be some modifications to that loop, would be your biggest ticket item. Lexington Elementary, this one we last time talked about the potential of doing an admin addition, so we can take some of those teaching spaces out of the classrooms and make sure your capacity stays spot on for where you need it to be. Otherwise, it doesn't need any academic additions. They would need HVAC replacements, lighting upgrades, technology upgrades. This is one of the older schools by far. And then Lexington High School came in at a 2.8. This one we talked about our concerns with the academic capacity and the potential to swing that over to the tech center. So we still haven't shown any additions here, but it will need some kind of an academic capacity relief. They also need to do a pretty big window replacement, HVAC, lighting replacement, and a big chunk of kitchen upgrades. is what's driving this one up. Oop.
Can you unpack a window replacement? I can't get my brain necessarily wrapped around that right now. Is that mostly for security, or is
Mostly
it just
for
age?
mostly for the age of it. At a certain point, you're going to want everything to be double pane with fresh seals all the way around, so you're not getting drafty windows and wasting your air conditioning, predominantly. Sometimes it does come down to a safety and security issue. If we notice a bunch of the windows aren't latching shut and it's just leaving the school perimeter open, then we'll flag all of those as well. But in this case, mostly age. Pleasant Hill Elementary. This one came in at a 2.6. We have the academic capacity issue in here as well because that's still in the same cluster of red on our heat map. We do need a roof replacement, the rooftop unit replacements, and a mechanical, electrical, plumbing overhaul. We talked last time about repurposing this to be an upper elementary school, so that is still a potential option for it since this one is going to be harder to actually just add on to. Pleasant Hill Middle School didn't have any of the capacity issues necessarily, but they do need a pretty hefty roof replacement project going on here. All in all, the school's in pretty good shape, though. Rocky Creek Elementary will be next. This one got a 2.7. It's in pretty good shape aside from the exterior cladding situation that needs to happen, which will be on one of the main maintenance items. The academic capacity and the car loop extension that needs to happen here. So we did talk about doing an academic addition on this campus last time. And then last time we showed you the potential floor plan for Lexington Technology Center and how that could be reclaimed for classrooms for the high school. Combination of that, technology classes, and using that the maintenance bays for the district maintenance team instead of doing an addition at their building. But presently, this is what we've looked at that floor plan to be. It really is just a general maintenance kind of situation. The tech center is in pretty good shape.
I have a kind of a broad question for you.
Yes.
So in kind of looking through the scoring you provided, if I take out the outlier of the old Pillion Middle School, which is a 2, and South Lake, which is a 3.9, which I still question how it's kind of low, considering it's just a year old. But I'm not going to pause there. I'm going to keep going. If you take those two out, the range of our schools is a 2.6 to 3.4. It's a pretty small range, right smack in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
So would the takeaway be that our schools are fairly well maintained? They're a little aged. They got some things that need to be worked on, but for the most part, they're in pretty good shape. Is that?
Yeah, I would say so. You can tell walking every single one of these schools that the maintenance team does a really good job of keeping everything up. But that's also kind of what I was saying earlier about the 4s and the 5s. While I don't necessarily flag those while I'm walking through, we do go back after the fact and say, perfect exit signage, great amount of fire extinguishers. Everything else that could be a 5 does get calculated into that, but it just does not make it into this chart. We could do a more comprehensive deep dive into that if that's something that you guys wanted to see. But there are a lot of 4s and 5s that just don't get roped in.
Yeah, that kind of goes back to my South Lake question. Like, if it was completed just yesterday, I mean, would we still expect it'd probably be a 4.2? I mean, would it never hit a 5, or how
I mean,
does
if
that
it was
work?
completed yesterday and everything was done to code, it would be a 5. Yeah. So it's really going to be things that we're starting to see, leaky ceiling tiles, or we're starting to see floor tiles that are popping up everywhere. It's going to be really small things that we flag throughout. But I would be hard pressed to say there was a single 1 at South Lake. Probably weren't even really a whole lot of 2s. So. Yeah. No, I understand that. But there are a lot of 4s and 5s if you guys do want to have that rundown of it.
Probably what Sarah's trying to say is that, the team walks through the facilities and they notice kind of what's wrong. So the 4s and 5s aren't really scored, nor do they really get to influence the overall scoring that you see for each facility. Because, if we recorded everything that was a 4 and a 5, then the scoring would be skewed higher, right? It would be skewed higher. But I would say that the team was fairly consistent in terms of walking the facility and scoring in a very similar way. So we feel pretty confident that the scores when compared to one another are fairly accurate. Does that make sense? Okay.
Add one thing to that. The spreadsheets for every school that has.
Hold on, I got a question.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm confused because I thought you said after the fact y'all went back and added the 4 and 5s back in, and then she said y'all don't.
Into our personal part of it. So, and Maggie can attest to this. She asked, "Do you want me to price 4s and 5s?" To that point, no, not really, because those are almost perfect. We don't want you throwing cost at something so menial.
But the 4s and 5s aren't in that score.
Not in that. Mm-mm.
Because it's reflected in the total costing.
Yeah. So,
Can I jump in on that?
absolutely.
I was going to save this for the end, but since we're on this topic, I just want to stay on this number. So before, when you started at the very beginning, we saw the 1 through 5s. So am I correct in stating that 5 represents excellent condition of some type and 1 represents extremely worn, damaged, or inoperable?
Yes.
Okay. We also got a 612-page detailed facility assessment on Friday. I did not read it all. But are these instances by rating pie charts, are those summaries derived from that report?
Yes, they are. The 612-page report breaks everything down into its individual category. So every school will have, like, let's say, flooring coming in at a 2 or a 3. Beyond that, in our spreadsheets, that flooring category might have 50 things that we flagged throughout the school, and then what you see in that report is an average of that. All of those get averaged into this.
Okay, so do me a favor. Go back to South Lake Elementary. It's slide 24, if that helps. So that says 61 instances with approximately 87% rated fair, 8% rated poor, and 3% rated critical. Am I reading that correct?
Yes.
Okay. In reviewing the detailed page for South Lake, I counted 21 components that rate 1 through 3. And this chart says 61.
Is this in the 612-page one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So I counted, for South Lake, I counted 2 in critical, 2 in poor, 17 in fair, 215 in good, and 1 in excellent. So the 61 number doesn't match the 21 number. So how did we, I'm just trying to figure out why the numbers aren't matching.
No, absolutely. So the long report comes straight out of everything that we put into Launchpad. So, and sometimes it does have trouble tallying those numbers up. So you make me want to double check that one also. But when we pull those 4s and 5s out and it starts to skew that number, that's where I kind of rely on the Power BI of it to run these up. So
Yeah, for what it's worth, I also spot checked it, Centerville, Lakeside, and Gilbert High, and none of those instance numbers matched in the 1 to 3s either.
you said Centerville.
I did Centerville, Lakeside, and Gilbert High, and I can send it to Dr. Price so he can pass it along to you so you don't have
Absolutely.
to redo the work. But I'm just having a hard time, especially when we talk about South Lake, because the numbers aren't matching. So I'm having a hard time following along with not matching numbers.
No, I get that, yeah. And I can have our data analyst guy look back through that and make sure that he actually pulled all of the spreadsheets before we ran these numbers up, because that could be where the difference is.
Okay. My next question on these numbers is if a rating of 1 means that a component is extremely worn, damaged, or inoperable, and a rating of 2 indicates that it's a poor condition, basically nearing failure. I reviewed looking at South Lake. There was a rating of 1 related to a basketball court, and it said the district would like to add another basketball court at South Lake, a school that's only on its 2nd academic year. And then there was a rating of 2 requesting playground turf installation at the same school. Are those being scored using the same scale that would represent components that are worn, damaged, and inoperable when it is a request? Because if you don't have a basketball court, how is it a 1?
Yes, I understand that question. So it depends on it. The 1 to 5, while we have some pretty tight verbiage on that, we will make changes to those. So say something was a security issue, we're likely going to make that a 1 because we're more concerned with the safety. And so we're going to go ahead and bring that down to a please hurry up and fix it, even if it's not a glaringly bad thing. If it's a request that somebody in the district made, whether that was the kitchen manager or the principal or something like that, we typically also bring that down closer to a 1 or a 2, depending on what the request is. Does that kind of answer that?
Yeah, so then related to Centerville, there were 149 components that were rated excellent, and we just talked about Southlake. There's only 1 excellent. So Centerville opened in 2020, I believe it was, and Southlake opened, I believe it was last year.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we have a school that's been open almost 5 more academic years almost, with such a lower rating, such a higher rating than one that has only had students in it for 1.5 academic years?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's where I was saying I think I need to have our data person pull it again and either make sure all the 4s and 5s do go in or they all come out so that it's equivalent across the board. Because that's what I was saying at the beginning, you're not really going to see any of the 4s and 5s on here, and we're catching that some of them did slip through into that presentation. So there just needs to be a little cleanup there, I think, on the comparison between them. That's a very good point. Any other thoughts? You were here, right? Okay. So Lexington Tech, we already kind of talked about here. It's still same idea as before, which is renovating portions of it to use for the high school so that you don't have to do any additions over at the high school. Rosenwald also came in pretty low on the score, and that's mostly because of the age of the facility. This is also in the non-traditional because it's not really being used for classroom spaces right now. So we don't need any academic additions here because of the way that it's being used. It'll be maintenance and renovation projects, namely a gym ceiling potential replacement, and some other renovation projects just to bring it closer to the age of the other schools. North Lake Community Learning Center. Again, this one's kind of used for alternative purposes. All in all, campus is in very good shape. There is a lot to this campus. Biggest things here are going to be your parking capacity, your cafeteria and kitchen renovation, and then demolition of a residential building that is on the property that the district owns. That's just kind of off to the side. So this one got a 2.4 as well. So building we're in now and the buildings across the street, those averaged out to a 2.7 when you put all the different buildings together. This one really just needs general maintenance as far as we are concerned there. There's no additions that need to happen to these buildings. District maintenance building, 2.4, and I think part of that is just by nature of what the space is because they're doing carpentry and things like that, and they're the entire time. We did need the addition here, but again, if we were to take over some of the spaces at the technology center, that would alleviate needing to do those here. IT and operations buildings, they kind of just need an interior layout modifications. They need to have additional offices for some of the spaces, so we are planning to subdivide areas that already exist in there. So there's not any really additions, it'll just be interior renovation. Building is in good shape though. The transportation center, again, this one is just more offices that are in pretty good shape. The biggest need that we found out there is there needs to be a restroom building built for all of the bus drivers because they all come in and use that tiny office, which was designed for office capacity, not for every bus driver the district has.
Right, so that's another one that just opened and it's a 2.9, and so that's just hard to understand.
Yeah, so this one has weird things out there that are like and Jim can correct me if I'm wrong, but they needed like some high bay space. They needed more program elements, I think, that weren't originally included into it. So it's less about the quality of the building and more about the pieces that the building needed from the get-go that it does not have, if that makes sense.
So I think that's a hard one to swallow, given that budget was already more than double what was in the original bond referendum. So is there a reason why we didn't build it the way we needed it?
I mean, I can't necessarily speak to that one because we weren't part of the team that did that design, so I'm not sure what components were maybe asked for originally that are probably the pieces that they were asking for when I walked through. And then keep in mind, again, a lot of these things are going to change as they run through our whole list of everything. If they decide, no, that was a wild ask, we don't need to do that, then they can always pull that back out again, which would then change all the scores. Were there any other questions on these before I pass it over to Maggie?
Just want to make a clarification. So the scores were directly affected by people that y'all spoke with as you walked through buildings that could just throw their wildest dreams out in the air?
Well, I want to correct that by saying anybody that threw the wildest dreams out there absolutely did not make it in. So if it was just a crazy ask, that's one thing. In comparison, we could have had an athletic director that said, I want video scoreboards in all of my gyms. And then I talked to Jim and team, and they said yes or no to whatever those items were, because there are a lot that were a frivolous ask. Those have already been removed. We're still refining that process, though, so if there's anything else that needs to come out, that's coming out. Because all the people that we spoke to would have been principal, kitchen manager, the school officer, Jim and his team from a maintenance and operations standpoint. So we weren't just like taking the drama teacher's suggestions for a bigger stage kind of a thing.
I do have one question, and I did just send Dr. Price and the board, I sent you guys an email with that slides, so you had those numbers, but also in there, I'm sorry to make us go back to last meeting, but we didn't have this ahead of time, so I wasn't able to look at it until after the fact, and I have a capacity question that I think is really important before we start talking about finances of adding capacity.
Okay.
So in the demographic report that came out in December of 2024, I am just picking a random school here because it was one we're talking about needing some capacity at, and that's Pleasant Hill Elementary School. According to the demographer, in 2023, the capacity of that school was 76% in use. That was what they told us. And they estimated that by the time we got to 2036, we'd be at 81%. In the report that you all provided to us last time, that same school has 2023 at 129% and 2036 at 139%. I have multiple questions about that, but my first question is, for an academic year that would be completed by the time we saw that report in December of 2024, how did we go from capacity of 76 to a new report that says 129 when the academic year had already happened?
So we noticed that too with the demographer's report initially. You can tell how many portables are on this site, so that was a perfect example of one to pick. The demographer counted in the capacity of the portables as well, which is not how we would traditionally calculate capacity. The preference would obviously be for all the students to be inside of the classroom. So while the demographer might have captured that as 14 additional classrooms outside, from an architectural standpoint, we don't look at that as the full capacity.
Okay, so let's walk that out. Building capacity for that building is 680, according to the demographer's report. So not the portables, just the building itself. According to the demographer's report, the building capacity was 680.
I think if it's from the demographer's report, they did count the portables. If it's
No,
from,
they had two columns, and I'm going off of the column that said building capacity. That number was 680. I didn't include their portable number in that. The F2 core capacity that's submitted to the State Department is 1160. Pleasant Hill's peak enrollment was in 2019. They had 971 students. So help me understand what numbers we're supposed to be trusting, because we have a number that tells us one thing. We're submitting a number to the State Department. We had 971 students in the building in 2019. I'm pretty sure the fire marshal didn't get called. I'm pretty sure kids weren't hanging out of the windows. Like, we had a plan. So how did we do it then that we can't do it now with less students than a peak enrollment in 2019?
Well, I'm just writing down these numbers, and I don't have the backup in front of me, but I would say in 2019, were the portables there?
It wouldn't matter if your building capacity was 680 and your core capacity is 1160. You're still...
Well, I can't speak to the calculation of core capacity because that was done by someone not us and not the demographer. As educational designers, we have a formula that we use to calculate capacity, which takes the number of classrooms that are used as homerooms. It is multiplied by the district's preferred teacher-to-student ratio, and then it is multiplied by a flexibility factor. So, for instance, you always want to have some flexibility built into creating your schedule from year to year. So at the elementary school level, like those homeroom classrooms, those students typically stay in that classroom most of the day. So that one room is occupied 6 periods out of 7. One of the periods is a planning period for that teacher. So that gets a higher utilization factor than potentially a high school, where you have a certain number of homeroom classrooms, but then you have other elective classrooms that don't contribute to capacity. So,
And I understand that. That's why I picked an elementary school, so we wouldn't get lost in the weeds over all the factors of higher education levels.
sure.
I guess what's really hard for us as a board, though, when we're trying to communicate with the general public, we've got a concurrency thing going on in Lexington County. What number are we supposed to give them? Because according to our report that we reported to the State Department in 2019, we had 971 students in that building. According to the report that we, in 2019, whoever the board chair was, signed off on, we had the capacity of having 1,160 students in that building. So the numbers, the math's not mathing, for lack of a better way
Sure.
to say it, not so eloquently, because I can't wrap my head around how now we had 896 right now this year as the latest number we got, but we had 971 and we weren't doing fine, maybe it wasn't ideal, but we did it.
Michelle, can I,
Yeah,
one thing?
please. Yep.
Sorry, so Pleasant Hill Elementary, the building envelope is 680. There's 24 portables on that campus and we use 20 per portable for 480. So the total building envelope plus portables, 1160 on Pleasant Hill. So that's,
But isn't your core capacity number, correct me if I'm wrong, based on like how many kids can go through the lunchroom, restrooms? Isn't that what the State Department defines our core capacity as?
the core capacity does take those things into consideration. I don't know how the State Department purely, what their exact definition of core capacity is. I'd be taking a stab in the dark at that. But yeah, the core capacity takes into account all the systems that school has in place in terms of what it can hold. And when you factor in just the classrooms at Pleasant Hill Elementary, it's 680. And the total capacity of 1160, that's taken into account 24 portable classrooms and 20 kids per portable. So that's how that number was calculated.
Okay, so how in 2023 we had a capacity of 76% according to demographer, but what it was after, like what I'm getting at, it was after the fact. We're not talking about a projection. 2023 happened. Demographer put their report out. They said that our capacity from that year was 76%, and now all of a sudden our capacity from that year was 129.
So the 76%, I believe, would be that enrollment number 9. You said 9 something, I think.
Well, 971 was the peak enrollment from 2019.
Okay.
I'm talking about 2023.
So I think that 73% capacity is looking at the 1160 number, looking at the total number of classrooms, both in the building envelope and portables. You subtract out that portables, I think that's when you're going to start seeing it, be at over 100%. So it's looking at it's looking at the school differently, apples versus oranges, building envelope or total capacity with including the portable classrooms that are on that campus.
We might have to run the math together offline because the demographer's report and your number are different. The number they gave us is different than the number that you gave us. I took out portables for that reason, and the math just doesn't add up.
I think the other thing to add to that, for an example, at Lexington Elementary, where we're talking about doing the admin addition to get the admin out of the classrooms, in a lot of these spaces, we were looking at how it's designed versus how it's currently being used. So say a campus has the special education programs get shifted predominantly to that area. It, to the demographer, is going to look like the capacity is one thing, but for the use case scenario of that school, you're not going to be able to put as many students into those spaces because they are specialty or because they have put a different program selection in
And
there.
that makes total sense for a forward-looking
Yeah.
forecast. What it doesn't make sense for is something that
Understand.
the academic year happened, the classroom was used the way it was used that academic year. That didn't change from the projection. It's not a projection, it's a fact in time.
But can we take that as a follow-up item that y'all
Yeah,
evaluate our
absolutely.
numbers and help explain those to us? Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, any other questions on that before we toss it over to Maggie?
Okay, so it's always fun talking about cost, and I know everybody really hones in on an overall number, so we're trying really hard to kind of preface, don't hone in on the overall number, it's still a work in progress. You want to see an open book and watch the process, this is part of it. So I think we have a handout we can pull up, and I think you guys all received that handout. These costs have been vetted based on one scenario of multiple. Yes, that's the correct one. So I think in a couple of different clusters, we have a couple of different scenarios, i.e. Gilbert. We've priced Gilbert Middle School. We've been asked to price a Gilbert High School. We're working through that, but we wanted to give you, again, a first picture. What we have started to do is figure out how to lay all of the projects out on a timeline. That's really important because of the escalation, which we keep talking about, but we really want to make sure that you're getting a full picture of what the cost could potentially be projected out. And I know this is going to be really hard for people that don't have a handout in front of them because it's pretty small, but if you go all the way to the left, you'll start to see us building in all of these scopes. So for example, in the Gilbert area, this again, scenario one with a new middle school. The proposed growth and capacity projects included Gilbert High School additions, a new middle school, repurposing Gilbert Middle School, Gilbert Elementary School, and Centerville Elementary School. So those projects are now placed on a timeline showing the design time, so the time it will take for them to actually design the project, a couple of months in there for what we call contract negotiations. That gives a contractor time to actually go out to the market and get pricing and come back and put together what we call a GMP and then present that to the district so that they can review it, negotiate, and then land on a contract. The blue lines are the actual construction time that we've assigned for these projects. So we've really tried to think through these scenarios now, even though they're in the future. And so what we've done is we've laid all these out over the course of the next 5 years. These are the projects that we anticipate being needed within the first 1 to 5 years. There's a lot of cost associated in all of the slides that you just saw that don't necessarily fall in that 1 to 5 year range. We're still working through all of that. But we have pulled out all of the roof replacements and the HVAC upgrades that would potentially fall within that 1 to 5 year range and started outlining those within the schedule as well. And so these costs are now reflective of the cost associated with a full, the roofing replacement that's needed and any licenses, bonds, insurance fees, contingencies that you would typically see on a GMP cost from a contractor, and that it would also include a portion of cost that would need to be covered by your district that a contractor would not carry, such as third-party testing and inspections, if there was anything else that was needed associated with that project. It's lighter on roof and HVAC upgrades. It's going to be heavier on an addition because now we're talking technology, furniture, and more things. So the cost is intended to be all-inclusive of what we call hard costs, which are contractor costs, and soft costs, which are district-incurred costs. It also now includes escalation based off of this schedule. So these costs are fairly vetted out per this schedule. So as you guys start to review the schedule and review the programming, we can update these costs. I know Mr. Rice asked the question how quickly we can update costs. These are now laid out in a way that we can pretty quickly update it and respond to anything that you guys have and want us to change. And for example, with the new middle school, if you decide to go with a new high school, we can plug in the new high school pro forma cost, place it where it needs to be placed, make any adjustments, because it's going to change the overall cluster need. You're not going to need high school additions at that point. If you're building a new high school, we might need to rethink that. But for the purposes of today, this is a fairly vetted schedule and cost for what you're seeing. The last thing I wanted to point out on this is the other CIP renovations. So this would be anything that was within the cost that you just saw that aren't associated with roofing or HVAC upgrades. Maybe it's finishes, athletic upgrades, site changes, anything like that. That's where you're going to see those reflected in the schedule. However, we'll be providing a lot more detailed cost breakdown for you guys in the district to use when you're actually starting to go out and procure these projects. Specifically, for the other CIP renovations, the 5 categories that you saw that were building envelope, site, health, safety, and security, MEPF, and interiors, all of our costs would be summarized into those 5 categories. And so that's the cost you'll see there once we finalize all that scope, vet it, make sure there's no overlap, and start to input them here.
Can I ask a question about one item on this sheet? And you may be getting there, but under the Lexington cluster, under Beechwood Middle School, new PS, can you?
Primary school.
Okay.
Yes, defining the difference between an elementary school and primary, and I can write that out next time.
I did have a question about just a number that stood out to me. I would have expected a new technology center to cost far more than the number on here. So this is it's great news if it is. But it says 94.8 million. Is that really all?
Oh, we could put more money as an estimator.
I was thinking a new technology center would be more in the cost of like a high school.
Right, and that's less than the middle school.
Right, so a new technology center is not going to have all the athletic package that a new high school will have. It's not going to have your performing arts center and those scopes. And the size in general is just not going to be as big. Cautionary, again, this is based off of a specific square footage program that we have behind the scenes kind of vetted, and I know you guys are just kind of starting to see those. So yes, for what we interpret as the program that we think you need, this would be the potential cost.
A question I have, all the new schools, new primary school or new high school, middle school, is the land cost included in this as a soft cost?
If we think you need to purchase land, yes. So we have talked to Realtor to determine the specific area. Again, it's a guess. You know, I say a guess. I would say it is an educated estimate of what we think it could cost. He works really hard to give us a cost per acre. We assigned the number of acres needed for that specific school. So a primary school is not going to need as much as a middle school and a high school. And then we include that cost in our numbers. So yes. And I know this is a lot of information. So I know, feel free to email and ask questions. And then I'll just say again, so all of these costs, I have pro formas with backup information. It shows how many acres that we assumed for each school. It shows kind of what we assumed for furniture costs and technology costs. And so all of that's getting vetted with leadership to make sure that we're all on the same page with the owner's soft costs specifically. The rest, all of the hard costs are based off of historical data. And then for escalation, we talked about this in our last meeting, but we don't just look at escalation with just the projects that we see. We look at the Turner Cost Building Index, which is kind of a very well-respected entity that puts together cost every year. And you can actually Google them and look it up, but we use their cost escalation, and we've used an average of the last 3 years to make sure that we're trying to factor that in. And I know there's a lot going on in the world right now, so we're still monitoring that very closely, and if we need to update that before we finalize, we will do that.
Maggie, is your construction schedule more so based on assuming a CMAR model?
Yes.
Because I noticed you had like your contract negotiations, they seem to be 2 months on each project. Is that literally like a CMAR contractor doing negotiations with subs for 2 months, or how?
No, it's typically both. So we try to, the design will end, and then they'll send us the documents. We have to send them out to the sub-market. That takes about 6 weeks, typically. That's pretty aggressive, but we know this, this market's has a lot of good subcontractors, so we feel like that's a reasonable amount of time. And then we have additional time to put together the GMP and present it to the district, and ultimately we have to get it signed. And then we actually have to go out and contract with the subcontractors. So it's building in enough time for that whole process.
So does that include time where potentially there would be value engineering between the architect?
Yeah.
Is that included?
Yeah, so a typical CM delivery, which is what we're basing this off of, because this is your typical process. It actually provides 3 opportunities for a CM contractor to provide feedback on cost and potential cost savings items. And I'm talking through your design process, but typically it's about 25 to 30%. The design team will stop, take a snapshot, send it to the CM. The CM will price it. We're using sub-input and try to give you an idea of where they think this cost is going to come in. If at that point it seems like it's coming in over budget, then we can start to look at cost savings opportunities, and then those get incorporated into the next set, which is typically around 50% design. It's called design development. The whole process happens again, and then ultimately we go out to the market at the final 100%. Sometimes it's not 100%, sometimes it's a permit set, maybe we have to put some contingencies in there, but to meet the schedule, close to 100% design, we go out to the street and do it all over again. So the idea for the CM at risk delivery method is that we're not in a position where we're, having to VE at the end. We're hopefully, honing in on the budget through that process.
I just want to make sure I understand the aggregate number here correct.
Yes.
So there's 2 columns on here, budget for growth and capacity, and then budget for renovations. Renovations could include growth capacity needs, or are they more inclusive of those more like capital improvement maintenance changes?
Yeah, so the first column is all the stuff we talked about at our last meeting, additions and new builds, and then we did include the old Pillion Middle School project because that's kind of all inclusive of what we were talking about, projects being driven by growth and capacity needs. Everything in the next column is going to be more of your existing school renovation needs. HVAC and roofing is what you're seeing reflected in that total now. Once we continue vetting these, honing in and making sure there's no overlap, we'll be filling in this other CIP, and that'll be your renovation cost.
Okay, so we won't have a third column. It'll just be these 2 columns, give or take. I'm just trying to get to, so this total aggregate right now with obviously a lot of factors at play is $687.4 million.
Yes.
Does that cover everything we talked about last meeting and this meeting?
It includes everything we talked about last meeting and your roofing and your HVAC needs. It
And
does not incorporate your athletics and any other CIP projects that were in the individual slides. You're already adding numbers.
Well, I imagine we'll start dovetailing into the financing piece of this, that there are components you might finance through 8%, through a referendum, there are multiple options to finance different pieces. Is that something we'll be discussing tonight, or are we saving that for another evening or day?
I don't think that particular piece was on the agenda for tonight, but what we can do is plan to make sure that we incorporate that discussion at one of our future presentations.
And so just to confirm, we're going to get follow-ups on those scores and kind of the 4s and 5s and that, and then we're going to get a follow-up on this capacity number. Math, not mathing. I don't know a better way to describe it.
Yes.
All right. Board members, any other questions? This portion of the meeting? Well, thank you all again for being here a second time.
We thank you again, and happy to entertain, every and all questions. We want to make sure that we are moving forward with transparency and giving you the best information available to make these decisions. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, board. So at this time, we're going to just take like a 5-minute recess because we've got to rearrange tables for our next portion. of our budgetary items and for the fiscal year 27 general fund operating budget.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board. Tonight, we will formally launch budget season and discussion with you all. We have worked to identify needs, requirements, and wishes for the upcoming school year. And tonight, we will introduce these items to you individually, so as we move into prioritizing and approving, you all will have the context and the rationale for these items to assist with your considerations. Unfortunately, we do not yet have our revenue projections, and we know that will play a huge part in this entire process. Between now and our first reading in April, we expect to receive forecasts for state and local revenues. We've heard from the House's proposal we may get numbers this week. As a result, we will not be asking you to prioritize anything in tonight's introduction, but rather an opportunity to see what has been collected and then ask any questions that you may have. Based on prior discussions and last year's budget presentation, we established 3 focus points for this year's process. First, we wanted to try and honor the Salary Study Committee recommendations that were made last year. Those consisted of establishing a $2,000 cushion above the state's minimum teacher salary scale for beginning level teacher pay and what we pay. We currently have a $3,500 cushion above the minimum starting salary, so we do have room to work with. The committee also recommended that we maintain a balanced step increase from 1 year's experience to the next. The same request was made for support staff steps, and we did that in last year's budget process, and we would like to sustain that. They also recommended supplements for our positions that were the hardest to fill and hardest to retain, our special education teachers. We also accomplished this last year. There was also a recommendation to consider all classifications of employees for pay raises whenever one group was given a pay raise so that no one was left out. Secondly, we aim to sustain our low student-teacher ratios. We had an FTE presentation at our last board meeting, and we are continuing to staff our schools using those previously established ratios. And finally, we wanted to present the identified new items in different categories to help with consideration and budget planning purposes. Some things are required, such as state and federal mandates and fixed costs. Some things are previously established district standards that may not be required, but we try to implement consistently. And the final category of things that are not required but have been identified for your consideration as would like to do's. As a quick review, at your December workshop, you participated in an activity where you identified your top priorities for this upcoming budget cycle. Due to our projected growth, facility needs were identified as your top priority. Those will primarily be addressed with our facility study and our capital project budgets. Employee salaries and compensation continue to be a priority to help us remain competitive with surrounding districts in the Midlands and districts like ours across the state. And finally, behavior support. Teachers and administrators have continued to identify this as an area of need, and you have identified it as well. A similar activity was done with our advisory councils, and I've included their results here. You may see similarities to your priorities. Facility needs was identified by our parent group. Salaries and compensation were identified by teachers, support staff, and students. And behavior support was mentioned by teachers and support staff. As a side note, these groups were not told what your priorities were before they began their activity. Only after they were finished were they told about your 3. You also see some additional items such as intervention positions, special education staffing, mental health resources, and more class opportunities for students.
All right, thank you, Dr. Price. Now we're going to move on to our new expenditure requests. I do want to give a quick shout out to my fellow senior leadership team members and our finance department. It has been a tremendous amount of collaboration pulling these requests together and working on the budget process. We're going to continue working and pulling all the information from the principals and departments into our consolidated budget, but this evening we're really going to focus on our new expenditure requests. You can see that we have 6 boxes on the screen. As Dr. Price mentioned, we have our state mandates, our federal mandates. To the far right, we have our fixed costs. Then you have your Lexington 1 standards in the bottom left. Then in the middle, we have your would like to do category, and this is specifically to certified salary schedule increases. We actually have 3 options there. Dr. Price will go into that in more detail on a later slide. And then to the far right on the bottom, we have the additional would like to do items.
As a reminder, we have 3 strategic goals in our strategic plan. 1 that focuses on academic excellence, 1 that focuses on positive climate, and 1 that focuses on resources. As we go through the different items in this presentation, you will see the corresponding strategic plan goals listed on the left-hand side with the specific strategy number. As we go through the different categories of the presentation, you will see the estimated dollar amount for each group at the top of the slide. By visiting the link on this slide, you will see an itemized cost list for each item. For 2 of the items, we do not yet have cost estimates for, but we will provide those to you as we move through the budget process in the coming weeks and months as those amounts become available to us. We have 3 state-level mandates that we need to account for in this year's budget. For the food service fringe proviso transfer, there is an annual requirement that the general fund must cover a prorated portion of the food service employee benefit payments. As salaries and corresponding benefits have continued to increase, we have not adjusted the budget for the transfer. Additionally, with the new funding formula that is being considered at the state level, the amount required to be transferred increased as well based on the guidance received from the State Department of Education. The state has authorized a 2% increase to the state's minimum pay scale for bus drivers. Well, I should say it's part of their budget proposal. We already exceed that scale, but we would like to honor the 2% increase here as it also aligns with recommendations for other positions we are recommending. The Educator Assistance Act authorized credit for occupational experience for professional employees entering the teaching profession. Our HR department has been working this year to gather this information, and these changes will go into effect next school year. In order to maintain compliance with state mandates regarding special education caseload limitations, we will need to add positions to meet the increasing number of students identified with disabilities, especially those with more complex needs related to their disability. It's important to note that if the IDEA was fully funded by the federal government, these positions would not need to be covered in the general budget. The transformation from communication facilitators to American Sign Language interpreters is necessitated by a change in the State Board of Education required qualifications for these professionals. The current communication facilitator positions will be repurposed to American Sign Language interpreters, and the difference in these salaries will need to be accounted for in the budget. In this category, we'll address increases in fixed cost, or the cost of doing business for us. The annual financial audit contract requires an increase to the budget line item for the annual financial audit. We will be in the last year of the 3-year contract where the fee has increased each year. The final fee will require an increase of $3,500 for a total of $85,000 over the course of the financial audit services. Ms. Miller?
All right. The next item we have is item number 10, which is our annual leave payout amount. As we have provided increases in our salary, we have not increased this budget line item, and therefore we want to make sure we increase that budget because we are seeing a trend where we are going over that line item. This year, we are still in good shape with that. And in the past, this hadn't been a concern. It has been increasing gradually, but with our vacancy allowance adjustment that we did last year, it's making it more critical that we go ahead and increase this line item for that anticipated leave payout. Of course, it's going to fluctuate, so again, it's just a projection. And then number 10 is for our substitutes. And also, as our salaries are going up with that, the amount for our long-term subs is going up. So we're not paying a higher amount to our outsourced services, but the amount for those long-term subs is really increasing. So we need to go ahead and increase that as well. And
Line number 11, which is a workers' compensation insurance premium increase, and that is just exactly what it says it is. Our insurance premiums are exceeding the current budget amount for next year, so that is a fixed cost increase. And then line number 12 is a step for all employees. Our certified staff are required to have a step by law, and traditionally we have done this equally, so that is the largest item in this category, estimated at just over $4 million. So.
And I have lines 13 through 16. Microsoft Office licenses. In the past, Microsoft offered free licenses for education, and last summer they stopped that. And so we did have a small need for some Microsoft Office licenses for curriculum for some of our teachers and as well as some of our business operations. So we had to buy some there. We had some extra money that we had at the time, and so we are in a 3-year contract for that, and I don't anticipate that we will be able to ever get rid of those completely just because of the nature of some of the work, particularly in our business offices. Our increased cost for T-Mobile, this captures the cellular service on our buses that operate the camera system on our buses. This is a cost that just had not been captured in transportation budgets or in IT budgets last year, so we wanted to get that captured this year. The internet bandwidth cost increase, we have increased our network services, and we've also added some redundancy that will allow the additional traffic on our network to be captured and hopefully not have any slowdowns. And the final thing on there, software cost increase. We just estimated about 1.5% increase from our total software costs. Some of our contracts we have for multi-years, and so we have a fixed cost. Many of them we don't. And so that 1% to 2% is typically what we see year to year, that we just capture that for cost of inflation purposes.
May I ask just a quick question about when you guys have said a couple times, I've heard it hadn't previously been captured in a budget, but did we spend the money on it in prior years? So is it actually increasing the ultimate expenditure for the district or just increasing what we're planning to budget so we're not over on a line item as an example?
One of the things that I can speak to, I think probably relates to the T-Mobile. There's additional funding, alternative funding that can be used in the first year of implementation of certain projects, and so it could be a situation like that where we had another funding source in the prior year, so we still paid for it, but now it has to be captured out of the general fund.
Is this an okay time for us to ask questions about these sections? Okay, so I feel like I ask this question every year, and maybe I'm just not understanding. I don't understand why the step for all employees is added as an increased cost. Because I'm not, as employees step up, 30, 40-year veterans retire and 012 comes in, and I don't understand why every year this is an increased cost. It doesn't make sense to me.
In a perfect world, if they truly did roll off when we anticipated and we had fresh new staff coming on, you would think that would work, but that's not how it always.
It seems that's the trend, though, that we see in our HR reports with retirees and then new people coming in. Is there a way to break down like how much increase that is every year? So basically, it's like every year that I've been on the board, we've just been retaining these teachers for longer years, and we're having less retired than we have new coming in.
It would have to be, we can get some more detail on that to try to get that breakout.
Yeah,
but
that's just one I'm having
everybody's
trouble wrapping
moving
my-
up, so if they were at a step 25, they're going to move up to a 26, so the cost of each step is higher as the years go. So even though some roll off, they don't match up perfectly with the lower staff coming in.
I think seeing an example of the math, like you're adding $5 million for everybody who steps up, you save $1 million for those that roll off, you may save another $1 million, but just show us how the math works, maybe an example. Yeah.
Can I ask one? I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Okay, I had one more question. Can you tell me, like, this American Sign Language interpreter, the two there, like, just practical day-to-day operations, that's 2 physical bodies with 2 physical students who need the interpretation? Okay. And my brain is just, I'm just asking. I don't know how many people there are out there that can fill those positions. I mean, is there an opportunity? I mean, I hesitate saying this, but like AI, like interpret, I don't know, are there other options out there?
I believe that there are requirements now for
Okay.
the services that we have to provide. Dr. Adams is smiling back there. And that's what's changing, is that the requirements that we should provide to students has changed.
The reason I was asking that is because, I mean, it used to be that if a student had services where they could have, or accommodations where they had something read to them, now they get robotic voices and headphones reading to them. And so I just didn't know if this fell under that same umbrella.
Dr. Gaskins, would you like to add?
Well, there's a state board regulation that's really strict on exactly how these services have to be provided. And so, correct.
I know that Ms. Henson was nodding her head when you were talking about the substitute increase in cost, but I don't understand that, so I'm sure I might not be the only one. And with $1 million, I just would like a little bit more understanding about what exactly we're talking about here.
Yes. So what she was trying to explain is our percentage that we're paying the company isn't going up any. But every time we increase the pay for our teachers, it also increases the pay for the sub. So not the daily rate, so it's not your daily sub rate, but when you have a long-term sub for a teacher, we pay them the rate that you would pay based on your salary schedule, because you pay them just like you would classroom. So when our pay scale goes up every year, so does that rate for the substitute that you're paying. So we have to allocate for that each year.
Can we get some type of an understanding of how many, like what's our vacancy rate like, or fill rate, like how many long-term substitutes? I know that's such a loaded question because it can change with so many factors, but
right.
Over the last year.
I do wonder if that's increased with the like paid parental leave that we have.
Absolutely.
I think, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So it's not just teachers being out for just personal reasons.
Like
it's
surgeries and
it's
stuff.
surgery, it's maternity leave, it's all the things, paternity leave, it's all the things. Yes, absolutely. But we can absolutely get some data for that, sure.
Any other questions about state mandates, federal mandates, or this page of fixed costs before we move on? And I'll stop on each slide to see if there's any questions as we move forward. Okay. Next, Mr. Cooper will pick up here.
Yes, sir. Thank you. This item number 17, this represents the cumulative budget of all service contracts, maintenance costs, and repair costs for every district facility. This is needed to fund the necessary maintenance, inspections, and repairs at all schools, district buildings, and on district grounds. Number 18, utility costs. We anticipate rate increases from both Dominion and MCEC this year, and this increase we estimate to be necessary to pay the utilities for all district facilities. Number 19 is our standard increase that we do have annually to fund our portion of our SROs, the SRO expenses of our school resource officers, our portion to the county and to the town. Number 20, property insurance premiums. These could increase this year. We do not know.
Go ahead, Mr. Rice.
All right, Mr. Cooper, line number 18 on the utility cost. I've heard that Dominion, we might be anticipating there are some rate increases, but is there a particular, I guess I have a twofold question. One, is there a particular percentage that you expect to increase? And then, we don't have to unpack this today, but it might be something to unpack. Have we explored with Dominion possibly going to a different rate structure than the one that we're on? I mean, we may have a very favorable one, but from time to time you can negotiate, let's go from rate 23 to rate 27, and they have some other incentive programs to large users of electrical energy. So that's my two-part question.
I have two quick questions. One is about the school resource officers. I know our state is touting school resource officers. Now we're putting them in all of our schools. Do we get money for that? Or is it just we were already paying for our own, so now we just keep paying for our own? Right, so Mr. Cooper, but what you're saying though is our district either pays for them to the different municipalities or we have grants. Is that and who pays the other portion? The law enforcement agent. Okay. I wonder if there's ever been discussion, I don't know, Dr. Price, at the state level, compensation to districts that were already doing this, because it just seems interesting to me that if we weren't already ahead and paying for resource officers in our schools, that we would then be getting funds from the state. Is that right?
That's a great question to ask, Ms. Henson, and I've been asking it for the past few years when the legislature took up a goal to put an SRO, a full-time
Right.
SRO in every school. So that initiative was to find where that did not exist and provide the funds to make it happen. Many districts were proactive in their steps and their budgeting to put an SRO in just about every school. So only in those places where that didn't occur, in early phases, some schools, you may remember, shared an SRO, and some didn't have one at all. So the state has stepped up to fill that gap. What they have not done is said we want to make sure that SROs are fully funded at the state level. Their goal has been to fill the gap and make sure an SRO is at every school. So for those districts who were proactive, budgeted intentionally to make sure that that would happen, those districts for now are expected to continue to pay that portion of the bill. There's been no discussion that I'm aware of, even though the question is asked, will there be an effort to start working backwards now to offload some of that burden from districts who took the early steps to make it happen, to now recompensate them for those, but not recompensate, but to take that cost off of them and absorbed by the state? That has not been discussed. I don't know if it's been considered, but it hasn't been discussed.
Can you give me just the top maybe 2 or 3 reasons why we're seeing the service contracts, repair, and maintenance costs go up? I know that's probably a laundry list.
Any other questions for this page? So now we move into the Lexington 1 standards. These are the items we have tried to identify that have become part of our practices, and we would like to maintain them and address consistency. So we'll start with Mrs. Price and HR items.
Okay. So our first one you'll see there, number 26, took a little bit different approach. I think Dr. Price will kind of explain the rest of it in just a second, but as part of the Lexington 1 standard, you will see we have a $500 minimum here for the certified staff increase. This $500 keeps us at the $2,000, above the $2,000 state minimum salary schedule, which was the recommendation of that committee from last year. He's going to present to you, I think, some other options as well, but the standard would be, that would be the minimum that we would want to do. So that would be part of the standard. If we want to go above that standard, he's going to present some other options of what that could look like as well. But we would certainly not want to do anything below that standard. That would put us, at 52,500. So that would kind of be what option number 26 looks like. 27, which is the support staff salary schedule. That is a 2% increase, which again has been kind of the standard. That's kind of the number you're hearing thrown around for the state as well. That has been the traditional number for support staff in alignment with that goal. Number 28 and 29 kind of go together. Those are those hiring pools that we've talked about. We traditionally have done one for our general ed applicants for certified and support, and one for our special education. And we talked about in our last meeting in here just how important and crucial those are for enrollment adjustments, for IEP meetings, for different things that come up where those positions may be needed.
Ms. Price, can I ask a quick question on that?
Yes.
So I assume we had a pool this year, but you're estimating an increase for the pool next year.
Correct.
So are we having to make our pools bigger, or how does that work?
Well, right now we still have 9 positions left in the pool. It's still, that's total. That's with us giving some back to the pool, though, as positions go away for different reasons. So that, as we started with 20 at the beginning of the year, we've used a lot, and then sometimes we are able to give back as positions get dissolved or other things happen. But we will continue to use 9 positions. It's not over. We still have 10 left in the year, so there will not be 9 left at the end of the year. Whatever is left at the end of the year will roll back in, so we won't have, we will probably have something left at the end, but it will be very little. by the time the year is over. So we do have to replenish that because those positions will stand. You know, those one-to-ones are still needed next year. It's not like we can do away with that. So those things do still have to stand at the end of the year. So we do have to ask for that again as we go into the new school year. All right.
I still struggle. I'm sorry. I know I struggled with it last year, and I still am struggling with it this year because the way I read it is it's 1.8 mil. So it's 900 each is what is budgeted in there. So it's 1.8 million additional money needed for the budget this year that we didn't need last year. That's where I'm not computing the. I know we have to replenish the pool. But didn't we have a certain amount of money budgeted last year for the pool? If so, how much was that? But now we need 1.8 million more?
Correct, because like I said, so for example, if I hired a one-to-one from that pool, that one-to-one is still needed for that student. So I am still using that money, that position is rolling up. We're still needing that in that person in that position next school year. So I still need that position to roll up. Then I need the pool in case I need another one-to-one for next school year or whatever other position I might need.
So how much, and just you can follow up on this, but how much did we have budgeted for the pool for this current academic year?
We had 10 FTE in each pool.
So we had the same amount of money.
Correct.
So we had 1.8 already in the budget. And now you want us to add 1.8 to the budgets.
Okay, I hear what you're asking. I think what she is saying is those 10 positions that, and here was the other budget. One of these is going to be having to be added here, and so those dollars follow. So this budget increases, and we need to add another one to get this back to 10.
Maybe it will help me if you can show me some numbers of actual employees and budget numbers over this year versus next year. I may be able to better conceptualize this because I struggled last year and I'm right back struggling again.
Gotcha. We'll work it through. That sounds like a plan. Number 30 is a supplemental pool of, this is programs that may not have existed in the school year prior or so this is not people, this is programs, this is athletics, this is a departmental chair, this is things that have started that kind of evolve throughout the year as things happen, and archery, robotics, I'm trying to think of some of the different ones that started this year. These are things that we have to kind of do as the year goes on, and if there's not a pool of money there to pull from, sometimes it's days, sometimes it's dollars. I think we have several new sports this year that kind of got started that weren't really planned for at the beginning of the year that they had to go back in and assign some supplements to. So there's a small pool that's kind of kept for that to make sure that those people get paid as they're assigned to their duties. Number 31, this allocation was presented during the 224 board meeting, includes the FTE, obviously, formula, and that's listed there, the minus 3.6 certified FTE. Number 32, this is the administrative salary schedule. This is, as Dr. Price referred to earlier, that committee asked for us to do the same that we do for One for All, and although that we've traditionally given a 2% increase to support staff, we don't do that for administrative. We do the 1% there, so that's listed there. And I think I'm supposed to skip down to 36 because that's me as well, and then they're going to come back to 33. We also still have just a couple of positions that are out of alignment in the division compared to, there's 3 positions that are not correctly aligned, and they should be on a different grade than they are, so we just need to bring those back into alignment due to their duties compared to similar positions in the divisions. So those are listed there. I think we cleaned up most all other positions, and those are 3 administrative assistant positions. So those are listed there as well. And I think it's back to you, Mira.
Yes.
So, item 33, we have 0.5 of the district school counselor coordinator currently paid out of Title IV federal funds. With the expected decrease of those funds, we need to move at least 0.25 of the position to the general fund. We've been able to reserve this current year enough carryover to take care of the other 0.25 for the upcoming year, and hopefully we'll know with more certainty moving into the budget season next year what we can anticipate with that federal funding.
Any questions for Lexington 1 standards that haven't been asked so far? So this next portion is the would like to do's, and we're going to do a breakout activity in just a moment. But for this page, I wanted to spend a little time explaining this. It's been referenced already by Ms. Price and Ms. Miller, that in both the governor's budget proposal and the House budget proposal, they include a $2,000 increase to the state's minimum teaching salary scale in every cell of that scale. As you recall, the Salary Study Committee's recommendation was to keep a $2,000 cushion above that scale. And right now, I believe that scale is at 49.5 currently. It'll go, yeah, it's currently 48.5, sorry. And if the $2,000 passes, it will go to $50,500. Right now, our starting teacher salary is $52,000. So if we were going to keep that $2,000 cushion, this first item from the Lexington 1 standards would be to bump the starting salary up by $500, okay? If we wanted to give our teachers more of an increase beyond the $500, which is what the Salary Study Committee recommended, then it could be instead of a $500 increase, it could be a $1,000 increase, a $1,500 increase, or a full $2,000 increase to the starting salary scale for a beginning teacher. The projected amounts or estimated amounts for those different variations are what you see here in the would like to do. So that'll be something that the board will need to consider, not tonight, but as our revenue projections become clearer as we move through the budget process, when we have a better idea of what our state and local revenues are going to be, that'll help us identify what our available funds are going to be. So how much of an increase to the teacher scale we decide on, we've got an estimated dollar amount. Technically, you wouldn't have to do any of them because we're already well above the state's minimum salary scale. So technically, we could check that box and we're still okay, but if we wanted to try to stick with the recommendations from the salary study last year, the Salary Study Committee last year, we would maintain at least a $2,000 cushion. Right now, we've got a $3,500 cushion.
So Dr. Price, I know we have the $3,500 cushion, and if I recall, that's because we thought that the state was going to hit that 50,000 mark last year,
Correct.
But they didn't make it there with their budget. Is there a risk to us paying $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 above the state salary schedule? And so I have two questions. Well, I'll let you answer that one, and then I'll follow up with my next question.
So risk versus responsibility. So the state will give you the funds to pay at their minimum scale. Anything that you want to pay beyond that, you have to look to your local revenues to be able to make up the difference. So if we continue to push beyond what the state's minimum scale is, then we have to figure out how we're going to pay for that. Last year, you may recall that we went with the full 3,500 because not only was that the initial recommendation, I believe, from the governor and the House, but the Senate brought it back down, but we were also looking to balance our increases for every step.
Right.
We couldn't do that part of the recommendation with less than a $3,500 cushion. And you may recall that even in this year's scale, there were some cells that we had to hold harmless because I think there were about, I can't remember how many, but there were some that we still didn't get there.
So, under the Lexington One standards, increasing the salaries by 500 would keep us at the $2,000 above the state. Would it be worth, board members, for us to discuss, other options? And I'll just say where my brain's going with this. Staying at that 2,000, that's a great cushion, and that's honoring the recommendations of our salary study committee. If we do bump it up another 500 or 1,000, y'all, $500 is like $20 before taxes a paycheck. I just don't know that our employees feel that. Like, are there other options out there? I know a few years back we did a bonus, and that could touch more employees than just certified. I don't know. Maybe we should brainstorm some options, not to mess up our salary schedule, in a way to keep it the $2,000. I don't know.
Well, I think one thing we had talked about, and I saw it somewhere in here, is bereavement leave. One thing I've always said is that sometimes it's not necessarily the paycheck, it's all the other benefits that you might be able to get. So I don't know enough about our benefit structure, but like, I know this is a state level thing, but I'm talking from corporate brain, right? Like, what's our 401k match? What is our, how much of our premiums for health do we support? Is it,
Basically, how can we stick to the $2,000? I think you're kind of thinking the same way, but what are some other ways that we can financially help our employees?
When you asked about a bonus earlier, there's two ways to kind of approach that. One would be to budget for it, to determine what amount of a bonus the board would like to give, and if we built that into the budget, that would be an annual standing item that's budgeted for.
Mm-hmm.
Typically what happens is whenever a bonus is considered on a year-to-year basis, may not be a guaranteed thing.
Right.
And so if you're going to do a one-time payout, then it's not abnormal to use your fund balance.
Mm-hmm.
And you may recall that last year we committed about $11 million from fund balance to balance our budget, which we're using one-time money to pay for recurring expenses. And we had, the board's objective was to spend down some of that fund balance. And so we can do that for a short period of time, but we won't be able to do that indefinitely. And so we'll have to make decisions about how we're going to cover that gap. So I think that has to be considered. And so there's two ways to approach a bonus, in my opinion. One is to budget for it, and it's something that'll be in place and people can count on, or others is fund balance, but just a reminder that we're already dependent upon our fund balance for recurring expenses. So just things to keep in mind.
Are there other ways that we could creatively, as a board, think about it instead of just a $500, $1,000, $1,500 increase for just certified? I don't know.
Yeah, and I think that was what the committee was trying to do. Is try to think of other creative ways, and that's where we came up with the stipends for special education. But I mean, if we get creative between now and the next workshop, I think it's worth, sharing our thoughts. But I hear what you're saying.
And again, I am not asking the board to tell us which direction you want us to go in, because we still don't have revenue projections yet. So once those start to come in and the picture becomes a little bit clearer, I think that will help in determining which direction we go with all of these things.
So I have a question. Make sure I heard this correctly. So when we took the salary study recommendations last year, based on what the state finished at, we had a $3,500 cushion between their starting salary and our starting salary.
Yes, sir.
I guess almost a question for you, Dr. Price, or even Ms. Price. The question I have is, seems like we had a much lower vacancy rate this year than we had before. Are we getting feedback that, is there any way for us to correlate feedback in terms of, did that cushion cause our vacancy rate to minimize as much as it did, or was it climate, or is it culture, or, I mean, because I know money talks from time to time. I mean, but I'm curious, how much of a difference do we feel like that made for our fill rates and vacancy rates?
No, I think it's always hard to make direct correlations. I think it never hurts, right? We did, for the first time ever, have, I don't want to say it out loud, I just want to whisper it.
Don't jinx it, Mrs. Price.
At the beginning of the year, this year, all of our special education classrooms were filled, right? Which had not happened in a very long time. And, that evolves and ebbs and flows certainly as time goes on. But, it makes a difference. I mean, it does. And I think it absolutely made a difference. Is the hiring environment changing? Yes, it is. We're seeing that. I think I shared an example with you the other day about some hiring statistics and the number of applicants that we're getting for positions and those kinds of things that we're seeing. And that's exciting and that's wonderful. And that does speak to the climate that our principals and teachers are creating in our schools and the types of schools that we have. But I mean, we also do, right now we are in our surrounding district, one of the top paying districts. We don't have some of the bonuses and signing bonuses and things that they do, but we are one of the top paying districts. And when you look to, some of the other features that we do have, some of the annual payouts and other things that other districts don't have, it's a good place to be. And so people want to come here and they want to be here. So I think it is the total package, but I do think that is a nice factor. We are good to our working retirees. We go to step 40. We talked about that a little bit earlier. A lot of districts stop paying at year 28. We don't. We go to year 40. And so we do have a lot of people in that 28 to 40 range who are still working with us. We do have a lot of people who come back and are working with us. And we want them back, and we keep having, a lot of them back. So all of that matters, and people want to be here. So, I think the longer we can continue to do that, that's great. We want to still be competitive and want people to see us that way in our surrounding area for sure.
And I'll add to one comment that Ms. Price made about bonuses and surrounding districts, that some of them do that. One of the things that I like to do is, whenever something like that is announced, to take a look at what does the bonus do to the salary. Does that push them over our school district or not? And in not every case, but in many cases, even with the bonus, the pay scale is still not what we are doing in Lexington 1. So I try to pay close attention to that. It's not in every situation, but in many of them it is.
Just a quick comment. Well, for myself personally, I feel like building it into the salary, it would be the ideal. That's just my thought. My guess is all of us would want to give as much as we can in salary and pay. My initial read so far of what we're seeing in the expense increases is this is going to be more than last year in expense increases. I may or may not be right, but that's how it's feeling right now. So my thought is the limiting factor may be the revenue that we can generate to cover the expenses we have. Knowing that salaries are a priority, we're going to try to give as much as we can, but I'll honestly at this point be shocked if we could even do the highest amount of salary increase unless the board is fully confident and go into our local community and saying we want to raise millage X amount to do this type of increase. I don't know, but I think that's going to be the limiting factor.
You can follow up with this at the next time we talk about the budget, but last year you gave us a pretty deep dive into savings where y'all had cut back. I only see 2 places this year where we have any cut back, and I think that everything is more expensive for everyone, and so we need to tighten the belt a little bit and look in places that, I know we've had like program conversations that we're gonna be cutting back in, so we need to show the community before we would ever be able to get anybody on board with the millage increase that we've deep dived into a decrease on our end.
Everything. Okay, so we have kind of covered the mandates, the fixed costs, and the Lexington One standards. These things that are kind of established that we want to try to make sure that we plan intentionally for. The next part is the would like to do's. And so this is where we're going to shake things up a little bit. So each of you are at a table and you're in pairs. And so I'm going to invite our senior leadership team members and any other guests who would like to join the table discussions. You're not required to, but you're invited to go to the appropriate table. And this will give you all a chance to go in to hear a little overview of the would like to do's and ask any questions. And then I'll give a signal and you'll rotate to the next table. So this is more of a one-on-one dialogue and interactive activity about the would like to do's. These are the things that are beyond what we've kind of identified as the must do's or the need to do's. So at this time, we'll give them a chance to move into their location. Yeah, also, you have a notes page that's been provided to you. If you can't see me, find me. Ms. Holliday made these so that as you go around and you see the items that are listed and you're engaging in conversation, you can take notes, make suggestions, and then afterwards we'll have a chance to ask any clarifying questions of the group.
Perfect. All right. Well, guys, we've done a lot of work this evening, and we will have a formal report from McMillan, Pasden, and Smith at the March 24th regular monthly board meeting, and the first reading of the fiscal year 27 general fund operating budget will also be presented at the April board meeting. With that, do I hear a motion to adjourn the meeting? Yes, sir. Yes.
Thank everyone for participating in a different version of budget introduction this year. This was different, but I hope you see that there has been a lot of planning and time that is put into identifying needs and trying to associate expense that goes with those. So I want to take this opportunity, number one, to thank Jennifer Miller and her team, because they take all of these ideas and all of these things that get identified and they start working to put cost associated with them. And then all the members that you got to engage with, this is not a 1 week process. Budgeting is really a year-long process that we are just kicking off publicly tonight. And so please know that there is a lot of time and effort that goes into this, and we appreciate the feedback and the questions that you all have asked tonight. And as we move forward with this process, and some of our projections become clearer to us, we will bring those to you as we learn about them. Also, please keep in mind that there are some legislative items out there that could impact our funding. There's a public one that was discussed at one of our last workshops or board meetings on boat taxes that is still being considered for passing, but there are also other things that increase PE time in classrooms, in schools, as well as some other things. And we don't know yet if those expenses will be, or those mandates will be fully funded mandates, underfunded mandates, or non-funded mandates. So all of that is still being discussed, and as we learn of those things, we'll be sure to bring them to your attention. But I just want to thank all of the folks that put in time and effort to put this presentation together, and for you all for engaging in the conversations tonight. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks, Dr. Bryce. Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Madam Chair, I move we adjourn.
Thanks, Ms. Shealy. Do I have a second? Thank you, Mr. Pizzuti. All in favor? All right, meeting adjourned.